Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Outlander, the Starz TV show, is now starting on its 5th season, and you might have caught my 3-part Droughtlander preview of the season. If not, there will be a link down below. Check it out, honestly. I put a load of really hard work into it. But yeah, Season 5's here, with Episode 1, The Fiery Cross. And this episode kicks off the season with a flashback to earlier days back in Scotlandshire, where a much younger Murtagh Fitzgibbons pledges himself to look after and follow young Jamie Fraser, shortly after his mum Ellen's died. You see, Murt's always fancied Ellen, so now he's going full like Severus Snape here, looking after her boy. But back in the current moment of 1770-something, it's the same Jamie, but he's an older man. And he's helping out his soon-to-be son-in-law Roger by scraping his face like a loony and filling in a whole bunch of exposition about what's been happening since the end of last season, and how they moved out this house, and now this house belongs to Bree and Roger, and it's actually their wedding day today. And look, there's a ring. And look, it's the Outlander audience. Hi folks. Meanwhile, Claire and Bree are doing like soppy mum and daughter wedding day stuff and being all very cute with each other. And Jamie's getting together the old, new, borrowed and blue thing, as is tradition, and he's getting more than a wee bit jittery himself. But he puts a bit brave dad face on, and even manages to keep from greeting when she gets all mushy at him. And after that, it's all about
marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today. Marriage, that blessed arrangement, that dream within a dream.
And things go without a hitch, surprisingly. Who'd have thunk it? Even Claire and Jim get to be reminiscing about their own happy day when they got married. But after that, it's time to get absolutely pissed, because it is a Scottish wedding after all, and that's how we roll.
Let's get pissed!
And even Tryon's been vaguely normal and human, for a bit. That isn't at least until he pulls him aside and then levels a pretty clear threat at him, saying that that he's stalling and catching the regulators, especially his godfather, Murtagh. And he puts him on notice because the problem with military men is they're a bit like the private sector.
They expect results.
Then the bride and groom stuff each other's faces with a bit of cake, and it's mostly good, but it's not all like rainbows and bunny rabbits, because Roger gets a bit of grief from being Presbyterian, and he talks kind of wistfully about going back to the future, and that puts Bree's back up a wee bit. But overall, things are good, booze, dancing and tongue twister games, and everyone's getting a bit happy. Until Bree accidentally overhears Jamie and Lord John discussing the dread pirate Eragon. Yeah, see, it turns out that Stephen Bonnet's actually still alive, and he's on the loose after he escaped getting blown up at the end of last season. Uh-oh. And she's obviously a bit distraught, and passes it off though, and has a bit of a heart-to-heart to Mum about, missing Frank, and then gets a wee reassuring hug from Teeth and Jamie. And a bit away from the party, blind Aunt Jocasta's having a secret rendezvous with her squeeze Murtagh. And it seems that it's that time of night because absolutely everyone starts getting jiggy with it in their own particular way. That apart from those who are still outside, drinking and dancing, or having PTSD flashbacks. But the next day, everyone seems remarkably not hungover. But it's time for the sober eye of reason between some of them, especially Murtagh and Jocasta, because he's an outlaw now and she's a landed lady. But clearly she cares for him an awful lot, and kinda seems like she wants talked out of a marriage proposal she's gotten. But ever practical and doer, he's a bit like, nah, you'll be fine, love. Ouch. And you think that's why she might be meeting up with Roger and gets all kind of antsy and accuses him of planning to steal the inheritance she planned to leave to Bree and then ditching Bree and the baby. And she says instead how she's going to leave it to Jamie so that he'll basically be forced to stick around if he wants the money, being a sinful Presbyterian, not a good Catholic like her and Jamie and that lot. Now Roger's all sorts of WTF and tells her where she can go and stick her inheritance and that he doesn't want it, his wife doesn't want it, neither does the baby. And it turns out that's exactly what Jocasta wanted, because he ends up storming back into the house and swears a blood oath pledging the wee baby's going to be his son for all time in every respect you can imagine. Jamie, on the other hand, catches the local hunter and trapper laddie Josiah putting the moves on Lizzie, or maybe that was the other way around. Turns out the boy's got a bad sore throat and Claire might have to do a bit of surgery on his tonsils, which that's not major, but it's also no joke in these days of manky rooms and dirt and no antiseptic or anaesthetics. And Jamie's hangover doesn't get any rest though, because Tryon starts talking to him about leaving his dude camped out nearby with a whole bunch of soldiers, and it's pretty much understood that Jamie and him are going to have to ride out and get regulator bashing in only a couple of days' time. So there's absolutely no way out of it. So after a quick powwow with the missus, Jamie dons his old kilt and symbolically lights the wicker cross outside, making it all fiery. and calling like the clan bannerman to him, as it were. And then he gets like some random guy, and then Roger and Fergus to swear fealty in like the old way. And it's all a bit strange, and clearly the Redcoats are confused, but they also don't seem particularly bothered. So after that, and he's gotten everybody else to do it, they build a big cross on the hillside, presumably so they can call the clans to arms if need be, ready to stand up to the Redcoats when the real war begins a few years down the line. But there's still one thing that's left to do. Jaime's got to get Murtagh to leave. And he does, and he releases him from his oath. But neither of them's happy, and both are a bit broken down by it. And Jaime kneels down and does a bit of a cry. So what did I think? Well, I think this was a really interesting episode. And I did voice a few thoughts on this on my Droughtlander video, but because these two scenes were released as a sneak peek. So I went over a bit of that, and I'm going to try not to go over the same ground a bit too much, because I don't want to bore anyone. But I think it's very clear, as I said then, that they're setting the scene for this season in a lot of different ways. And I think while there's an awful lot of like outstanding inter-character stories and arcs in place, the general lay of the land meant that all the characters, being that they're all in one place, not having a terrible time, things being sort of at peace, and then be able to rest and relax. I mean, obviously that doesn't include Murtagh because he's still an outlaw, and there'll be more about that later. But generally, the Fraser lot and the Mackenzies are all pretty much in accord, and then they're at peace at Fraser's Ridge. And the Redcoats aren't trying to actually kill anyone or arrest them at this point, but there is still an awful lot of interpersonal squabbles and old ire kicking around. Like the ongoing problems between Jaime and Roger. I mean, they've got huge beef, understandably so, considering all like the things that have happened. And Jaime clearly doesn't think an awful lot of Roger. I mean, aside from like the basic huffy dad, he isn't good enough for my wee girl stuff. Jaime seems kind of unimpressed that Roger's a scholar and a historian rather than a working man. And that's kind of surprising for Jaime because he's an educated man himself, especially, well, for his times. I mean, he had no problem with like lawyers and high-end business type people in the earlier seasons. And it's interesting that they're tying in the kind of a sectarian thing because with Jaime being a Catholic and Roger being Presbyterian, that they have a bit of a thing going on there. And it's not a big deal, but there's still that little bit of a and a sneer going on. But on that kind of note, I'd really like to give a bit of credit to Sam Heughan about how he's been getting into the role of Jaime as an older guy. And I think this season, or at least in this episode, it's a lot better than it has been in the previous couple of seasons. Like, it's much more apparent that he's actually playing him as a bit of an older guy. And it may be a result of me going back and looking at some of the older episodes when I was cutting together my Droughtlander stuff. But it's quite shocking how different the portrayal of him is. But it doesn't feel like a different character. It just feels like an older man. I mean, even if like Sam and Kat don't really have like the skin and the hair and the general look of people who've been through the things that these people have in their lives, in the kind of like working rough skin outdoor lives they've had, they both look like, let's be honest, pampered actor people that they are, who probably get facials and moisturize every day and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, come on, this is telly, everybody's gym fit or a supermodel on telly these days. That's not really a big deal.
Jacob, keep your shirt on!
No! But Roger, on the other hand, is interesting because he clearly wants to go home, back to the future again. And he's obviously looking at this 18th century bit as a minor inconvenience before he gets back to the future land of TV and antibiotics and soap and things. Although clearly Bree doesn't think the same way because, I presume because she wants to be with her mum and dad. I mean, you would think that she would actually want to go back to the future a bit as well. Because, she is a girl from the 1960s. She's got to be missing, fuck me boots and go-go pants and stuff like that. You would at least think so. But I also really liked the scene with Jocasta and Murtagh. In fact, all the Murtagh scenes this week were pretty great. And considering how much stick I've given Duncan Lacroix over the years for his ropey Scottish accent, maybe I'm softening him old age as well, but clearly this is so obviously a case of
spot the stiff
that I'm starting to feel sorry for the guy. But anyway, the scene with the pair of them having the conversation in the bed the morning after, partly it was the way Maria Doyle Kennedy played the vulnerability of Jocasta in that scene, something we rarely see from that character, because she's usually a quite conniving and very secretive kind of person. But it was great. She was almost pleading with him, wordlessly, to say something that is going to make everything work out okay, to give her a bit of hope that a future with him could actually be a viable possibility. But in another way, it's kind of a fantasy, and they both know it, and the fact he has to just kind of let her down with a thud. I also really liked how there was that mirroring between the opening scene of Murtagh and Jaime and the ending one, both visually and within the scene itself with what was said. And I got to commend them on that. That was a really nice touch, and it was actually quite touching. And it's been an episode that was frankly a nice, relaxing bit of fan service. It's a wedding. It's a happy time. There was callbacks, there was comedy moments, there was nice scenes with the actors. Some of these actors probably never ever get any scenes with each other, and they never get to share any screen time, and here they are getting to have a bit of a laugh and a giggle and do some fun stuff. And it actually reminded me an awful lot of, well, 2 episodes of the last season of Game of Thrones. And not actually in a bad way, but it reminded me of like the second episode where everyone's waiting for the big battle of Winterfell and they're all sitting around drinking and talking and catching up. And it reminds me of the episode immediately after the Battle of Winterfell where everyone's having the great big party because they didn't die. And I think sometimes a story needs to reward itself with that and reward the audience with that kind of letdown sometime. Not a letdown in a bad way, but just literally a time to actually relax and take a deep breath and go, everything's okay. And imagine, because I mean, remember that this is a series based on a bunch of books, and books that are known for being absolutely huge, with more than a little bit of going around the houses meandering and being a bit indulgent and spending time on one scene or another thing in a big way. And you can do that in a book. And turn that into a TV show, you can only do it so much. And I think spending half an episode purely on that one thing is kind of fair. I mean, fair enough, assuming that the rest of the show gets on with the plot, which would be nice, unlike some other TV shows that are on at the moment. Picard. That said, nothing's perfect. And this week it's had its share of issues as far as I'm concerned. I mean, to begin with, and this is something I said in my Droughtlander videos, those opening scenes are a bit strange. I mean, the one with Murtagh felt kind of way too short. I mean, it could be that there was more to it and it got cut, or maybe the kid had some lines he was supposed to do but actually couldn't act and they chopped that out, or maybe it just cost way too much to digitally de-age Duncan Lacroix to look like he's 25 again. In any case, it kind of zinged past that scene, and I felt like it should have been longer, despite being not a bad scene, but one that felt like there wasn't much to it. And the one after that, the shaving scene, I mean, yikes, okay. I haven't seen a scene like with this amount of exposition since Picard, and I know I've been going on about that, but it's on at the TV at the moment, so I'm watching it like the same weeks as I'm watching this. But although this wasn't terrible, there was some clunky stuff, especially considering that a lot of this information is actually given out again and again in this episode. I mean, we really didn't need Claire's expository voiceover. I mean, and the voiceovers are still bad. I mean, I've never liked the voiceovers in the show, and they haven't gotten any better. They always just sound bad, and Kat always reads them like, honestly, she reads them like she's desperate to go to the toilet or something like that. I mean, I don't know when they get her to do it, but it sounds terrible. It just sounds like she'd rather be anywhere else than doing these voiceovers. And as I said, everybody keep reiterating stuff. They kept mentioning the house was being built. They mentioned about 6 times in the episode.
Day off from working on the house, at least.
Once Jamie and I had chosen a spot for a new home. With the help of the settlers, construction began.
With my house unfinished, I'm relieved to hear it.
Okay, we know that now, so maybe we don't need to have it reinforced quite so much. And I appreciate that Sam's doing his older man bit, but playing it up for comedic effect, maybe. I mean, maybe that was the whole point. He was trying to, like, kind of put the shits up Roger a bit by putting the specs on and being a bit daughtery. But Sam, you're a grown man. Surely you know how to shave with a straight razor. I mean, seriously, this is actually really annoys me. Look at this. This is how you cut somebody's face open. Now, I know that this is acting, and when they filmed this, there's no way that that was a real razor. It's probably made of plastic, or it's blunt as a banana, and all they're doing is basically wiping foam off of the guy's face. But shaving's actually meant to be done at a 20-degree angle to the face. Like, that's how you cut the hair off without cutting the skin. And Sam spends half the degree with the blade directly, like 90 degrees perpendicular to Richard's face, and then doing this weird rolling thing across his upper lip. Now, no, that's not how you cut stubble off someone's face. You're more likely to either like slash his mouth off, or you're going to give him a really ugly bumpy rash. And now don't just believe me. I mean, the internet's full of videos with people explaining how to shave properly with these shaving razors.
20 to 30 degrees, so that you really won't know what a 20 or 30 degree angle is until you get started and see what it feels like.
I mean, and honestly, I've got a straight razor. I've used it. I don't use it very much because it's difficult. And even I had a wee careful test trying the little thing, and I've still got a face. That's all fine. But honestly, this just doesn't work. It just doesn't actually cut the hair off properly. That's not how you do it. So it kind of got my goat because it reminded me a bit of that episode where like Jamie's explaining to Willie how to get a deer, and then the wee laddie playing Willie does something completely different because obviously he's not been given the direction to do it right. Now, I'm not putting this on the actors. This is something the director should actually be keeping tabs on, like, and the people, the propsmen, the other people. I mean, I'm not saying they should have a shaving specialist, but I hate to say it, you think there would have been somebody actually saying to him, right, you're not actually doing that right. That looks stupid. But I also suspect that maybe part of the problem with this is because the main Outlander audience is largely female. Maybe they don't care so much. But let me ask you, ladies, if he was doing that on your legs, actually, you'd probably be happy with like Sam shaving your legs. But if he was shaving them like that, you might enjoy the time, but you wouldn't enjoy the bloodbath that ensued afterwards, and not in any kind of good way. And it just really bugged me. This scene bugged me so much. Also, right, scene near the wedding, despite with like Jamie and Bree, the je suis prêt line, that came over as kind of weird to me because Brianna isn't actually a Fraser. She's saying this like the day where she actually becomes a Mackenzie. So it's almost like she's mocking him. I mean, no, she isn't actually mocking him. Sure, he is her biological father, but her name isn't actually Fraser. Any more than if she decided one day when she went back in the past to call herself Prince or Squiggle. Like, it just seemed like a daft thing to me because, yeah, she's not a Fraser. She's not. Legally, in any sense. Sorry. I'm right.
I have spoken.
There was also an awful lot of really quick edits and kind of jumpy camera angles and stuff. And okay, I'll not get into that because it's the kind of thing that only really bugs a film nerd like me. And also, Bear McCreary, I absolutely love your work, man, but I've had this do 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 music stuck in my head ever since I saw the episode, and not in any kind of good way. And honestly, I'm really hoping that that's like going to be something that's only really battered out for this wedding episode, and we don't actually have to hear it every single week. I mean, I think it's probably like the Fraser's Ridge tune or something, but this particular range of it was like a horrible earworm that I couldn't stand. Probably just because they overused it a little bit. But on a final note, there's a big thing that clearly bothered certain demographics more than others, and this is like the burning cross thing. Now, as I said in my Droughtlander video, there's a totally uncomfortable imagery with that. There's a whole KKK connection, and I can't really speak to anyone's experience but myself, but I've got kind of mixed feelings about this for sure.
Are you absolutely sure?
I mean, partly it's because the whole burning fiery cross thing is an old Highland call to war. I mean, that's a serious part of history. That goes back to like the 14th, 15th century at least. And it's a really old part of old Scottish Highland culture.
When a chieftain sets himself to war, he'll burn the fiery cross, sending a sign through it the lands of his clan.
And other cultures at the time, I think the Vikings used things like this as well. And it was nicked, obviously, by some like racist third-generation American-born Scots in the States.
I can't see fucking shit out of this thing.
We ready or what?
And used for the KKK, but the fact is, it's the old Cran Tara, and that's Gaelic for the Burny Cross or the Fiery Cross or whatever you want to translate it at. But it's basically how the chiefs would signal the call to war, and it's essentially like that bit from Returning the King, where they light the beacons to signal the war. And the Highlanders basically used to do that. But the other thing is they used a cross, a Celtic cross generally, because they were mostly really staunch Catholics and they totally revered the cross. So burning actually meant something. I mean, none of this is to say that I don't feel sympathy for other folk who felt really uncomfortable seeing this, and I completely understand why they would. But looking at it from the point of view of a Scottish guy who loves his history, I mean, I feel it's kind of a disservice to go back and change something like this. I've seen various people suggesting they could have done alternate things, but I think the fact is, just because some racists down the line abuse this symbology, I mean, I don't think we shouldn't use it, especially when we're portraying something that happened back in many, many years ago. I mean, surely if we do change something like that, all we're doing is changing things to let like the racists keep what they stole. I mean, isn't that just letting the bad guys win? Anyway, that's only my view. It's worth seeking out the views of others. And since Outlander is very popular in America, I'm sure there's a fair few folk who will have very different opinions on big emotive issues like this. So that's just my 10p worth on it. And here, on like my own channel, where I'm going to say obviously what I think. But most of this episode, I mean, it was actually pretty solid. I mean, it might have been total fan service, a wee bit soap opera, and maybe a little bit slow, but I felt like it was kind of like a deep breath before the plunge into the sea. Things are probably going to get really nasty and rough fairly soon, and so I imagine this is going to be the only respite we get for a wee while. So on the whole, I was quite impressed. Decent start to a new season. And speaking of new things, I've started up a Patreon. Yeah. Turns out it's an awful lot of work to make these videos, he says after 5 years. And since people seem to enjoy them, I thought, why not give you the opportunity to chuck something my way if you like it? So if you do, and you want to drop me a wee something, doesn't have to be a lot, just go to www.patreon.com/grumpyopinions. And as well as that, there's always the Twitters where I'm at Grumpy Opinions. You can catch me on that and chat with me. And there's now a Facebook group as well I made. And there's not much on it because I don't really do Facebook much, but who knows, you know, go there and maybe we can start up a wee community and have a little fun. But yeah, go post on that, follow me on the Twitters, maybe subscribe to my Patreon, and I'll try and keep this all interesting and fun. So till next time, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.